Say that one more time.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you are a Beatles historian, so you're always talking about the Beatles history, but how did you get started doing the history of the Beatles? What's your background?
Yeah, well, mine was that I settled a big class action lawsuit, and when I got my money, rather than going out and buying a Rolex or a Mercedes, I realized that the Beatle albums I had in my house from when I was a kid, that roaches had attacked the spines of those albums. They left ABBA alone, they left the Beach Boys alone, they went after the Beatles. Maybe it's a roaches Beatles thing. And so I wanted to replace the original Beatle albums from the 60s. So I began reading up on them, and I would call up dealers and I would say, well, what I'm reading isn't making any sense. And they'd go, oh yeah, that's in every book. Being an attorney, I thought, well, what if every book's wrong and just copies the same misinformation? So being an attorney, I knew how to research, and I went and did original research. And in doing so, found out that much of what was written about the Beatles and how their records were marketed in America was wrong. And so I decided I would write a book on that called The Beatles Records on VJ, which would be one small footnote on the Beatles' history. And when the book came out, people said, hey, that's great, when's the Capitol book coming out? And it was like, the what? Yeah, the Capitol book. So I started writing a Capitol book, and when I got to about page 400 in my draft of that, I realized it would have to be two parts. So Capitol Part 1 covering the singles, Part 2 covering the albums. And I started advertising those books, and even before they came out, people said, well, when's the Apple book coming out? Because like Apple's my favorite Beatles era. So the next thing I knew, I was writing a whole series of books on the Beatles' American records. And then I figured people also wanted a detail of how Beatlemania evolved in America. So I did the book, The Beatles Are Coming, The Birth of Beatlemania in America. It's sort of a break from the other books, which cover all the records in great detail. And after the Apple book, you know, people were insisting I do a book on the Apple solo stuff with John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And then to wind up the series, I did a book called The Beatles Swan Song, which covers all the oddball releases that weren't covered in the other books, such as the Swan single, She Loves You, the Swan single, Sie liebt dich, and then also the German recordings with Tony Sheraton in those goofy Capitol theme albums from the 70s and 80s, like rock and roll music and love songs and things like that. There you have it.
Okay. All right. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.